We come. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair and all her people one. Good morning to you all, and welcome to our service on this May 17th here at First Parish Church in Weston. I am Jeff Barsnell, minister here. Be you a longtime member or a first-time viewer, we are delighted that you have tuned in to join us for a few minutes this day here in Weston, in our sanctuary, and in our ad hoc studio of sorts during this bizarre and unusual time in our lives. You are all missed, and we hope we are gathered soon here again. Our service participants this morning include Jeff Weeding, our organist, Ben Doyle, our soloist, Chris Scheller, our director of family ministries. In addition, Bill Sano is here helping us to coordinate things as our music director. And Bob Bridges and Kathy DuBose are joining us to light our chalice on this morning. The hymn verses for today's service were included in the PDF order of service that was emailed out to everyone and is also available on our website, on the main page of our website. I now invite you to join with me in singing our hymn, which can be found in that order of service or by simply running a search in Google or some search engine, "Come Thou Font of Every Blessing." Thank you, Jeff and Ben. I'd now like to call forward Bob Bridges and Cindy DuBose to light our chalice for this morning.
Adapted from Words for Chalice Lighting by Reverend Robin Gray, we prepare for the future. By the light of this chalice, we prepare for the future. We prepare ourselves for the times of triumph and hope and times of challenges and uncertainties that will come. We strive to be present to and caring of one another with loving hearts, even in the most difficult of times. We work toward expanding connections that will lift us out of isolation and strengthen our bonds within our communities and our world. And with resolve and action, pursue paths of justice and equality.
Thank you, Cindy and Bob. I now invite you to participate in a virtual exchange of peace of sorts. We use the amazing technologies that are in our pockets and on our desks to do all sorts of things, but we rarely use them simply to wish people well and to foster a better world. So take a moment, reach out to people you know from First Parish or from the community or around the country, friends, family, loved ones, via email, via text, or quick call. Send them a quick text, give them a call, and simply say good morning and wish them well. You might want to wish them a happy month of May and ask how they're doing. You may want to ask if they're getting out, if they're eating well, or if they're gaining weight like the rest of us. Simply say that you can't talk very long because you're attending church, but you wanted to wish them peace. I'd now like to call Chris Scheller forward, our Director of Family Ministries.
In Native American storytelling traditions, the character of the coyote often teaches us wisdom through folly. In this story, it starts off with Coyote having a very, very bad day. You ever felt like that? Like you just wanted to get away and be alone? Well, this is exactly how Coyote felt. And so he decided to get up and he started on his way. But just as he started, Rabbit came hopping up.
Hey, Coyote, where you going?
Well, Coyote was not in the mood for conversation. He was trying to get out of there. So he just ignored Rabbit.
Hey, Coyote. Hey, you know what's on the other side of that hill? Hey, I do. I just saw it. You ought to know about it. Hey, you want me to tell you, Coyote?
Well, Coyote was curious, but he wanted to stick to his mission. So he ignored the rabbit, and Rabbit, of course, felt like his feelings were hurt. But he just said to Coyote,
Hey, Coyote, you know what? You're acting crazy.
And then he went away. So Coyote continued on his way, and that evening, he sat down to build his fire and to sing and drum, as he does every night. But a funny thing happened. He started to doing his drumming, but when he went to sing, he couldn't remember any of his songs. It was so strange. So he just was able to drum a little bit and felt a little lonely, went to sleep. Well, the next morning, Coyote woke up. He was a little concerned about this, but he said he was on a mission, so he continued on his way. And this time, he came across a little river. And feeling thirsty, he helped himself to a big drink of water. And he felt a little tired, so he sat down again by some bushes, and he nodded off. Just as he was nodding off, the birds who were in the bushes began to chirp. Well, this jolted him awake. He started to feel angry that they were waking him up. So he stood up, and he started to snarl and bark at them. And it worked. They flew away, except one brave little bird, and she flew down to him, and she said, "You know what, Coyote? You're acting crazy." Then she flew away. Well, that night, when Coyote sat down again and built his fire to sing and drum, the strangest things happened. He couldn't remember his singing, but now when he went to drum, he couldn't even drum. It was bizarre. All he could do was sit and stare into the fire and think about how much he had lost. Well, eventually he did nod off, and he went to sleep, and he had a dream. And in the dream, a mysterious buffalo woman came to him. And he explained to her that he was beside himself. His singing and his drumming were lost, and he was afraid he was going to lose his fire. The buffalo woman, she explained to Coyote that his singing and his drumming and even his fire relied on his friends and fellow creatures for inspiration. And when he pushed away his friends, they left even his heart, and they took their gifts with him. And if he wanted to get back his singing and his drumming, he needed to go back, and he needed to welcome his friends back into his heart. And with that, she left. So in the morning, when Coyote got up, he heard the birds again. But this time, he decided to just listen to their beautiful singing. And then he decided he would go back the way that he had come from. And so he went back, and that night, when he sat to build his fire and do his singing and his drumming, he still couldn't remember a song, but he was able to drum a little bit. And the next day, he decided to go back even further. And as he was heading back, Rabbit came across his path, and he was so happy to see Rabbit that they just went running together and playing. And they had such a good time. And that night, when he sat down again to build his fire, he remembered how to drum. And his songs filled the air again with music. And Coyote never, ever again forgot how he needed to hold on to his singing and his drumming by holding on to his friends and his connections. That's the end of the story. I feel like we are all right now a little bit like Coyote. With missing our community, it's as if a part of ourselves are missing too. And so it's so important to remember how important we are to each other at this time. And it's so important to remember to reach out and find ways to safely connect with our community, because that's how we become whole. That's how we can be more fully who we are. May we all continue to find ways to give and receive love to the beat of the drum. Amen.
Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the heavenly Father's realm. Shine forth as the sun in the heavenly Father's realm. Then shall the righteous shine forth in the heavenly Father's realm, as the sun in the heavenly Father's realm. Joy on their head shall be for everlasting. Joy on their head shall be for everlasting. And all sorrow and mourning shall flee away, forever. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the heavenly Father's realm. Shine forth, shine in the heavenly Father's realm. Shine forth as the sun in the heavenly Father's realm. Then shall the righteous shine in the heavenly Father's realm.
Thank you, Ben and Jeff and Bill. Our reading for this day comes from the Gospel according to Matthew, from the 5th chapter, the beginning of the one sermon that we have of Jesus's. Here now, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Here ends the reading. I want to preface my remarks this morning with something of an update. A group of us here in Weston, as many of you know, rolled out a new community initiative 2 weeks ago. The Weston Cares Fund seeks to help local social service agencies and individuals in need in Weston and the 6 surrounding towns that we share with as a border. 100% of the donations received go to providing aid to people around here, people facing housing, health care, and food emergencies. Well, so far, over the course of 13 days since we rolled this out, we have raised over $23,000. And I'm pleased to report that the first checks went out on Friday. We helped one family whose father has both terminal cancer and COVID-19. We helped 2 other families, both single mothers and with kids, who are sick with the virus and cannot work and fear for their children and their housing. We are helping a food pantry buy more food, and we have a lot more work to do. We are providing aid and hope to some sad and to some hungry and forlorn people. And all of this is happening within 5 miles of where I am currently standing. This is a community-wide effort that will continue, I suspect, through this summer as the need grows larger and more dire over the next many weeks. I think life in the United States looks very different right now, depending on your station and your position in our society. While some of us are doing okay right now, albeit frustrated by virtue of having to shelter in place and maintain social distancing, others are destitute. Others are increasingly hungry and at their wits' end. Imagine being sick with this virus and having no health insurance. Or imagine not knowing where your next meal is coming from for you and your children. In a society like ours, many of us believe that we have a moral responsibility to help, to come to the aid of others during a time such as this. We have an opportunity to recognize our common humanity, our intertwined futures, and act out of that understanding and assumption. At times like this, we can honor and support our larger community, or we can acquiesce to those temporarily satisfying ideas and talking points that divide us and lead to suffering and distress. I believe that right now we need more opportunities to exercise our understanding of what we share in common as a community, as a region, as a country. There's too much division right now. We need opportunities, therefore, to foster togetherness, not separateness, to all get on the same page. We need more chances to form that more perfect union, to use the elegant and beautiful phrase from our nation's Constitution. Churches like this one have a long history and practice of encouraging this sort of behavior and response. It's in our institutional DNA, if you will. Our covenant frames all of this for us. In the love of truth and the Spirit of Jesus Christ, we join for the worship of God and the service to humankind. We believe in pursuing truth. We believe in serving what is holy in this world. And we do this by fostering a connection with what is transcendent in this life, and then by reaching out to others in acts of goodwill and compassion. Our history has informed this approach. There are not too many institutions that are a lot older than the United States, but we are one of them. We have a dedication to democratic principles, a dedication to the teachings of Jesus, an understanding about free speech in our deliberations, and a commitment to rational thought that has served us well down through the decades, indeed the centuries. And I think we could use a little bit more of Jesus' teachings. I think we could use a little bit more of rational thought right now amidst our national dialogue and situation. Allow me to share a short story or parable to illustrate what I mean here. Jesus liked to teach in stories. In fact, he was so successful at it that they remembered what he said and wrote those words down 30 or so years later when they started to compile those collections of writings that became the Gospels. Imagine people writing down something you said 30 years ago and what they might remember. So once upon a time, there was a lonely, lovely little town that was nestled alongside a flowing river. The river was the lifeblood of the community and provided fresh water and food and a source of irrigation and transportation. Well, as the town grew in numbers, it sought to expand, as towns are prone to do. And a group of town leaders proposed that they build a dam across the river. The townspeople were amazed that they had the technical ability to build such a structure out of rock and stone, but they did. It was a historically enormous undertaking. And within a decade, they had built a huge dam just above where the town was situated. And suddenly, below this dam, there was plenty of land available for expansion. Where once there had been this wide river, now there was this beautiful, flat, open plain that you could build streets and stores on, where you could place houses and build farms. The original builders of the dam created a special agency as their last act before they retired. The Dam Control Authority's job would be to monitor the condition of the dam and preserve the technical understanding of how it was built and how it needed to be maintained. Well, decades went by, and the little town prospered and expanded into whole sections of the floodplain where the old river had once flowed. And while there was still a river, it was much smaller, and it was channeled through one section of the town. Over time, people began to take the dam for granted, just assuming it would always be there, forgetting about some of the principles and the work of the original builders. Well, one day, someone noticed a small crack appearing in a section of the dam. The Dam Control Authority was called. They were called in to inspect the site and to take a look at the crack, and they recommended that the town fix it. However, such a repair would have required an increase in the town's budget midway through the fiscal year, and no one wanted to do that. Anyone who's been involved in town politics, I'm sure, would be confused by such a development. Well, next year, the crack actually grew, and there was now a small bit of water seeping through the crack. And this time, the Dam Control Authority recommended that a portion of the town near the dam be shut down so that some scaffolding and walling could be erected and that the crack could be properly repaired and addressed. This was based on clear, wide-eyed recommendations documented in a manual when the dam had been built several generations before. This time, a group of leaders responded, and they called for the town to do something, to follow through, fix the dam, address the leak. However, another group of local people questioned if such a fuss was really necessary and demanded that there be a review of what had been proposed. Do these engineers really know what they're talking about? They asked. Maybe we don't have to spend all this money on a dam right now. Maybe we don't have to close down a whole section of town and shut down all of these fine businesses just to make these repairs. That doesn't make sense. Well, this went on for some time until one day, the unthinkable happened. A section of the dam, boom, finally broke open, and the river began to pour through the town, flooding out and washing out whole avenues of homes and businesses and inundating farmland. And even then, there were debates about how best to proceed. Don't you understand how much this is going to cost to fix the dam? We can't afford this right now. The debate became quite polarizing, and the rhetoric grew harsh. City leaders hoped that the residents would heed the warning and recommendations of the Dam Control Authority, formed all those decades ago. But not everyone did. There were other groups funded by large companies with stores in the town, which spread rumors about the authority, and sought to undermine its credibility. What do these experts know anyway? They just want to keep their organization well funded. And so the dam continued to leak, while the townspeople argued about how best to proceed. I'm going to stop my story there. But let me ask you, what do you think is going to happen? Who is going to prevail in that little town built below a compromised dam? Will the townspeople heed the arguments of those wishing to dismiss the severity of their situation out of personal convenience and greed and ignorance? No doubt the choices this town makes will decide its fate. I'm reminded of a quote that I saw on a sign not too long ago. Things are simple. It's we human beings that make them difficult. We find ourselves amidst a profoundly challenging state of affairs that no one alive has ever experienced before. There are many questions and challenges that have to be addressed. This pandemic has already killed more Americans in 4 months than the Vietnam War did in 10 years. And probably many more are going to pass away, sadly, in the coming weeks and months. There are hard decisions that have to be made as a society and economy, as we've been forced to change our activities and slow down our operations. And while there are always political dimensions to any major debate set amidst a social or religious movement, there are also principles that we need to adhere to as a society. I'm reminded of that story about Mohandas Gandhi, the great political and spiritual leader of modern India. Gandhi was asked once what he thought of Western civilization, and he quipped with a smile on his face that he thought it was a good idea. Gandhi would go on to develop his own political and spiritual philosophy that was based on what he called satyagraha, or truth force, from the Sanskrit. He believed that a fearless and relentless pursuit of what is real, of what is true, was the best, indeed, the only way to live one's life, and certainly the only way to govern a country towards some prosperity and towards some vision. There can be no doubt that lives and nations rise and fall on the ability of people to agree on what is real and what is true, and then act based on that understanding. In the case of this pandemic, we know what we need to do in order to combat this. This is based on decades of public health science supported by our own government's Centers for Disease Control. The CDC was founded in 1946 at the conclusion of World War II. Experiences with malaria during the war and earlier experiences with typhoid and the flu pandemic of 1919 led to the formation of an agency whose mission was to study and then try to limit and even prevent infectious diseases in this country and around the world. It is one of the great developments of the 20th century. The CDC has arguably been one of the most influential American institutions around the world. Scientists and leaders from around the globe come to the CDC to learn about their research and their recommendations. And yet, over the last 3 months, the Centers for Disease Control has been more or less sidelined. They have not held one press conference since the pandemic began. Comparing this to how they operated during the SARS outbreak 13 and 14 years ago is notable. Several weeks ago, it was reported that the CDC had created a series of recommendations and a real plan, a detailed plan for how the United States can open back up our society and economy. The guidance had recommendations for schools, for parks, for stores, for churches, and it gave specific recommendations for each type of organization and venue. These detailed guides were consequently rejected because of concerns that they might slow down the opening up of our economy. Instead, in their place, a simpler, less involved set of guidelines were published and offered up earlier this week. The problem, of course, is that there remains no comprehensive plan. There is no detailed list of recommendations for opening up the economy. States and towns are left to themselves with little or no coordination or monitoring. And yet we know what public health guidance would tell us. We know this because we have generations of research and science. I am a parish minister. I am not a scientist. However, I can read about the history of the CDC. I can learn what other countries are doing. I can learn the principles of basic public health and how to implement them. Many of us have in the last few months. And if I can do this, surely our leaders can as well. If there is no vaccine for a highly contagious virus like COVID-19, the best course of action is to develop a test and then start testing a large percentage of the population, starting with high-risk groups. Every time you identify someone who has tested positive for the virus, you invite them to go into isolation or quarantine for at least 14 days while they are contagious. You then ask the people who have tested positive to give you the names of everyone with whom they have come into contact over the last 2 weeks. You then reach out to those people and you proceed to test them for the virus and see which of them is positive and repeat this process over and over. This is the painstaking process of contact tracing. It is the method and the widespread program implemented by those countries that have been the most successful in combating this virus. Countries like South Korea, countries like Australia, Germany, and yes, China. In essence, these countries have taken the research, they have taken the methodologies developed here in the United States decades ago, and they have implemented them in ways that make sense for their own societies and countries. None of what I am saying should be deemed controversial. And yet, to describe what I just did is somehow now deemed as being partisan. I am not trying to be political, however. I am trying to be moral, and I'm trying to be patriotic. I recognize there are always political dimensions to a public health and economic crisis. But there was a time not too long ago in this country's past when I would like to think that we would have responded differently than we have over the last 4 months. And I say this as someone who likes, as someone who supports the efforts of our own governor here in Massachusetts, Charlie Baker. There was a time when the premier public health organization in the world, the Centers for Disease Control, would have taken the lead in managing this pandemic. There was a time when reports about a spreading respiratory virus would not have been ignored or dismissed, but would have been addressed head-on by funding American companies to start making swabs, to start making the testing solutions and kits, to start making face masks and gowns and gloves here in the good old United States. The latest reports are that when there were attempts, when there were proposals to start making these items here on our shores, they were rejected. These proposals were put down. Just this week, a foundation that has developed a take-home test for COVID-19 out in the state of Washington, just this week, that foundation was asked to cease its operations and its testing protocols by the FDA. I am a minister of the gospel. I am someone steeped in the Christian and Jewish scriptures, but I am also an American citizen who believes in objective reality and in science. And reality has a way of exerting itself, especially when it goes unheeded, especially when it is ignored. It's interesting. We have just one of Jesus' sermons from his ministry, the Sermon on the Mount. And that sermon begins with a series of blessings for people presumably in his community. That's why we call this passage the Beatitudes. The Latin word for blessing is beata. Beata are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Beata are those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. These beatitudes, these blessings appear to be as relevant now as when they were first preached 2,000 years ago. Indeed, each generation has found them to be a source of inspiration, a source of solace, as each generation struggles and wrestles with the temptations of pride and self-centeredness, as each generation struggles to encourage mercy and compassion. Each generation, each group listening to these Beatitudes is therefore called or invited to hear these words anew and to consider how they apply to their lives, to their real lives. Blessed are those seeking the truth, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will increase their chances of survival. Blessed are those striving for some common good, for they will be a light shining in the darkness. Blessed are those acting on what is real and what is true to the best of their abilities, for they truly will inherit the earth. I hope and I pray that all of us, regardless of where we're coming from political perspective, will find ways to strive for the common good. It matters right now. It truly matters. Amen. Wherever you find yourself right now, be it sitting at your desk or on your couch, sitting at the kitchen table, streaming this on your monitor, hanging on the wall, I invite you to sit up a little bit more straight or stand up if you're so inclined. Take a deep breath in. Realize how fortunate and blessed you are. And join with me in this prayer. Source of all life, eternal friend, grant us an ease to breathe deeply of this moment, this light, this miracle of now. Beneath the din and the fury of great movements and harsh news and urgent crises, O Lord, make us attentive still. Make us attentive to good news and to small occasions, to the grace of what is possible for us to be and to do and to give and to receive, that we may miss neither our neighbor's gift nor our opponent's need. Precious Lord, grant us a sense of humor that adds perspective to compassion, gratitude that adds persistence to courage, quietness of spirit that adds irrepressibility to hope, and openness of mind that adds surprise to our joy. With gladness of heart, may we link arm and aim with you and with your signs of the coming kingdom. This we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus, who taught us to pray, saying together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen and amen. Many of you have inquired how you can support First Parish Church and our work here in Weston and around the region, especially when we are not gathered here on Sunday mornings. You can do so either by mailing a check to the church office or by using our shiny new PayPal account. The easiest way to do that is to have a PayPal account yourself and then do a search on First Parish Church in Weston. We should pop up as an authorized recipient. Regardless of the option you choose, we thank you, the members and the friends of this congregation, for continuing to support our church's voice, our church's presence, and our mission. What we do here matters, and it is worthy of all of our support. Thank you for joining us this day. We invite you to check out our upcoming gatherings and programs, including our virtual fellowship hour on Zoom that begins at 11:30 a.m., and a special meeting of our social justice task force or team that is meeting to orient ourselves and organize ourselves at 12:30 p.m., also on Zoom. There should be links for both of these gatherings on the main page of our church's website, and they are also included in the e-newsletter that was sent out on Friday as well. This coming week, We invite you to participate in some of our online offerings, also listed on our website, including our meditation programs offered on Wednesday morning at 8:30 a.m. and Friday morning at 9 a.m. In addition, we will be hosting a couple programs as well to check in with folks, including my weekly Pint with the Pastor scheduled for next week on Saturday the 23rd at 5:30 p.m. And if you'd simply like to find a time to connect by phone or real time, I invite you to give us a call or send me an email. We are continuing to discover many ways that we can be supportive, many ways that we can be a community from a distance, and together make a difference. I'm gratified to see so many of you stepping up and helping out and reaching out during this difficult and challenging time. That's what congregations like ours do. Thank you for being here this day. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord keep all those whom you love, whether here or in some other place. May God be your companion, and you be God's friend as you walk together through all the days of your life. And at the journey's end, may you find the welcome of God's love. It keeps us all. Amen.